Tomorrow's test has 16 questions. Now, bring your calculator. Make sure if it's one that needs to be recharged, make sure the batteries that it's recharged, or if it's doesn't have rechargeability, just make sure the batteries are good. Know how to use it. Don't go out and buy a brand new calculator that you do not know how to use. So because there are 16 questions, some are going to be faster than others. So my advice to you is if you come to a question that you do not know how to answer, skip it and keep going. You don't want to sit there and get stuck on a question for 10 minutes and then you may not be able to get to the easier questions. This is a test-taking strategy for any class. So just remember, if you come to something you don't know how to do, skip it, keep going, go back to it at the end. The test is not multiple choice. It's all free response. I think I did give you one multiple choice question, but the rest are all free response. Read the directions. If the question says to leave your answer exact, then I'm looking for your answer in simplest radical form. If it says to write your answer as a fraction, then I would expect you to write it as a simplified fraction. If you don't reduce the fraction, you're going to lose points. All of the questions that are calculator questions that you're going to need to round, they're all asking you to round to the tens place. If you do not round correctly, you will lose points. Because remember, on a standardized test, if you don't know how to round and there's two answers that are very similar, you pick the wrong one, you lose everything. So just remember to read the instructions carefully. You will have two word problems. The word problems will have pictures. They will have a picture of the triangle. The review is a pretty good reflection of the test. However, remember, don't always focus just on the review. Remember, you can always use your warm-ups, your homework, your notes to go back. But if you had no problem completing this review last night, then the test should be pretty easy for you. Now, also on Canvas is the additional review with the answers. You can do that if you're looking for additional practice. I still have the links for the GIM kits from the quiz. They're still up there. I do have another GIM kit for the trig for the end of the chapter that we can do after I work out any questions from this review. But let me just go through each part first, and then I'll go back and work out any questions you want to see. So again, I gave you that nice little synopsis of the entire chapter yesterday. But here was 9.1. And again, it's got the Pythagorean Theorem right there. So be able to find any missing side of a triangle, whether it's one of the legs or the hypotenuse. Whenever you're just looking for a value of x using Pythagorean Theorem, you're going to leave your answer in simplest radical form. Unless it's a word problem, then the instructions will say round to the tens place. You will also have questions like 4, 5, and 6, where I'm going to ask you, will these sides form a triangle? That's where you add and subtract the two smaller sides, and if that third side is in between. And then you'll also have to classify the triangle. Is it acute, obtuse, or right? Just like you did on the quiz. Then you will have also special right triangle questions from section 9.2. So you need to memorize the relationship of the sides. And then from there, leave your answer in simplest radical form. So special right triangle questions. All right, and then, okay, so number 5, it wants us to verify that these will form a triangle. So what I would do first is just make sure that they've given these numbers to you in order from least to greatest, and just make sure that this is the hypotenuse. So what you can do is square it, and then this becomes 36 times 3, and then 36 times 3 is 108. And then if you square this one, and then 100 for the 10, and then this becomes 4 times 2, and this is 8. So you can see that 108 is the biggest. So now all you had to do now is go back and add these guys, and you get 108, and it equals it, so this would be a right. 9.3, this is where we saw the similar right triangles, and this is where we saw those two geometric mean proportions. So make sure that you know both of those proportions. Again, the two proportions for the geometric mean. The first one is the geometric mean altitude, which is segment 1 over altitude, altitude over segment 2. And then the geometric mean leg theorem, hypotenuse over leg, leg over the leg Sohal. So make sure you know both of those proportions. And again, these questions will be left exact, so simplest radical form. Then 9.4, this is where we started with the trig, our SOHCAHTOA. So remember, tangent was TOA. Remember that tangent is opposite over adjacent. So on this, be able to answer and find a missing side length or a missing angle. Now, notice on this part, numbers 17, 18, and 19. When it just asks you to write your answer as a fraction, we're not hitting the tan button here. All we're doing, for example, on number 17 is doing for both. So you're going to do it for the tangent of J. And then you're also going to do the tangent of L. So remember, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to label my sides based off of J. This is opposite. This is adjacent. So for the tangent of J, all you need to do is fill in 11 over 60. You will not have to turn this fraction into a decimal. I've taken that off the test. So all you need to do is write it as a fraction in simplest form. If you don't reduce the fraction and it can be reduced, you're going to lose points. Then for the tangent of L, this now becomes opposite to L, and this one's adjacent. So now the fraction is now flipped. It's 60 over 11. Again, don't make it a mixed number. Just leave it improper, but just look to see if you can simplify. So make sure you understand the directions. So when it asks for the fraction, no tangent button here. Just put opposite and adjacent into a fraction and reduce. When it says to find the value of x, this is 20, 21, and 22. This is where we would use our calculator. This part also had a word problem here, so you can do that one to practice. I know this review didn't have a lot of word problems, so go back, review your word problems from your homeworks, your notes, and your warm-ups. Then 9.5, this is where we saw sine and cosine. So remember that sine and cosine, sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, and cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the so and the ka here. Again, be able to just write it as a fraction. Be also able to find missing sides. So for example, on number 26 here, if I wanted to find the sine of the two acute angles, it'll be sine and cosine of x, and then sine of z and cosine of z. So when I go to do this one, I'll label my sides in relation to x. This is opposite, this one's adjacent, and this one's hypotenuse. So remember, sine is going to use opposite over hypotenuse. And then here, if you could simplify, you would simplify. It can't. And then cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. Again, nothing to simplify. However, for z now, let's change the names. This is now opposite. And then this one is adjacent. Hypotenuse is still hypotenuse. So sine would turn into 48 over 73, and cosine 55 over 73. Still nothing to reduce. Everybody good on understanding the directions. Then 27, 28, 29, that's where you use your calculator, and you would use the sine and the cosine button. Be able to do questions like 30 and 31, where you're doing the complement here. Remember, all you're going to do is take that angle measure, subtract it from 90, and then change the word If it starts out as sine, change it to cosine. And then 9.6 finally, that was solving the right triangles. You will have one question like this where you have to find all the missing pieces. This question on the test is worth 9 points, 3 points for each piece that's missing. What I did differently on this test is because a couple of the questions are different points, right next to the question at the end, like for example, this type of question, I put that it was 9 points. I believe 13 of the questions are 6 points, and then there's like 3 that have different point values. But again, I wrote it right on the test so you know how much each question is worth. Yes?
How many questions are there?
16.
Okay.
So 16 questions, you're going to need to work pretty rapidly. So again, if you get stuck on something, skip it, go back to it. Just make sure before you hand it in that you have answered 16 questions. So this is a little review. Again, also be able to do questions 32, 33, 34. Those are simple enough. When you're looking for an angle measure, for example, on 32, you would just be doing cosine, the inverse cosine, and then put the decimal, hit enter, and then that gives you your answer right away. So questions like this are going to take probably like 10 seconds, as long as you understand what to do. And then angle Q here, once you do this on your calculator, about 71.3. So understand the directions of what to do. Once you get the test in front of you, don't ask me how to do it. The only thing I'm going to be able to do is read something to you. Any questions?